You are tuned in, logged on, and enjoying Hackers on Planet Earth. This is Hope 2020. We're in the 5th day of the event, having a fantastic time here on the talk stream. There's a lot of other stuff going on. There's workshops. We're going to have performances on the overnight. There are villages. Check out these villages. They're interactive, and people love to talk to you and share their knowledge. And that's really what Hackers on Planet Earth is all about. Our next presentation is from Karamoon. This is a British hacker based in Tokyo. He has a lot of different interests that we might hear about, but the main story here is something that none of us want to hear, which is the story of terminal cancer. Please, Karamoon, let's hear that story.
Welcome to this talk for Hope. It's called Hacking Cancer, a Personal Odyssey with Death. A rather dramatic title, but a very serious subject. Maybe it's not the kind of usual subject you'd get at a hacker conference, although over the years Hope has had an amazingly diverse range of talks and workshops and speakers, all of them directly or indirectly related to hacking. So I will try to keep this hacking focused. But obviously the core topic is cancer. So I'm going to explain a bit about what happened to me when I was suddenly diagnosed with terminal cancer in about 4 years ago to this week, in fact, July 2016. So I'm Karamoon, I'm British, but I live in Tokyo in Japan. So I was actually diagnosed in the UK. I had planned to go back to the UK, spend maybe a year there or something with my my kids to improve their English and just let them experience living in another country. And the cancer diagnosis was completely out of the blue. I picked up a chest infection on the plane over, and I went to see a local doctor. In England, we'd call that a GP, general practitioner. In the US, I think like a maybe family physician, family doctor. And she gave me some antibiotics, 2 weeks worth of antibiotics, and I got quite odd side effects from them. The doctor was suspicious. She said you shouldn't really be getting this kind of level of pain and discomfort from some antibiotics. So sent me to the local hospital for chest x-ray and endoscopy, 2 endoscopies in fact, like gastroscopy, where they put camera down into your stomach to look for any bleeding ulcers, anything like that. And also had an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, so putting a camera into your intestine, like up through your colon, rather unpleasant. And I was pretty confident that I knew what they'd find. I'd read a bit about why you have a colonoscopy and what kind of may cause like abdominal pains from taking some antibiotics. Went in feeling very confident they're going to find some things called polyps, so like little kind of mushroom-shaped growths on your intestine. I think about half of people have them, and they're generally completely harmless little things going in your intestines, and might be 1 or 2 or 3 millimeters across, and they can usually be removed then and there during the colonoscopy. The end of the camera has like a little metal loop that I think is electrified, and they'll sort of lasso the polyps and whip them off. And you'll be uncomfortable for a couple of days afterwards, and you'll be fine. And just in case, if there's like several of the polyps, they'll send them to the lab and get them analysed. So very confident that's what they were going to find, and then I was going to have my colonoscopy and my gastroscopy, and then a week later I'd be off on a family holiday to Greece, taking my kids to the island of Corfu, which I was really looking forward to. So you get sedated for that kind of thing. So you get this sort of tranquilizer. So you're aware, but you don't give a fuck really. You know what's going on, but you're not feeling pain, and you are kind of detached. So I kind of have the procedures, and then sitting around. The nurse asks me if I'm feeling okay, feeling fine. Another nurse comes in and goes through the gastroscopy report. It's, nothing to worry about there. And then she says, "Can you come with me to the other room?" And the endoscopist who did the colonoscopy is just going to go through the results. And the endoscopist was there and didn't look very comfortable. They said, you have a 35 millimeter tumor, kind of almost blocking your intestine, and you need to get it taken out. And there was another person in the room. I think she was either a doctor or what we call in England a nurse practitioner, it's like a specialist nurse. So she'd be like what we call a colorectal nurse. So I'm pretty sure from the uniform that's who she was. She said, we'll whip out this tumor and have it analysed, and worst case scenario, if it does, if it really is cancer, which potentially could be, although very unlikely in someone who's 36 years old, which is how old I was in 2016. You have a course of chemotherapy, a few months of chemotherapy, and then you'll have regular scans and blood tests for a few years, and then they say, cancer free, get on with your life, and maybe have a check, once or twice a year. I didn't know what chemotherapy was really. Sounded quite kind of futuristic, but anyway, it obviously wasn't going to be cancer. 36 years old, and so I went back home and told my wife that they found a big old tumor in the intestine and they need to take it out, and that I couldn't join the trip. So then I was going to stay at my parents' house while my wife and kids and parents went off to Greece for the holiday. And a few days later, I went back to the family doctor because I realised that in the UK, when you have any kind of hospital testing, the report goes back to the original doctor who ordered the tests. So in the UK, the medical system is broken beyond belief at every possible level. That's really beyond the scope of this talk, but it is appalling, and it's quite hard to get information and appointments at the big hospitals like your hospital. So I went back to the doctor's office, saw a different doctor, and I prepared all these questions about removing this tumor and what the procedure is going to be like, assuming it wasn't going to be cancer. I had a couple of questions ready in the very rare event it was cancer. And the GP said, male GP this time, and said, the report says you have cancer, so you'll get a meeting with a surgeon at some point, and an oncologist as well, who will talk about other treatments that you'll need. So walked out, went back and saw the family, and that was quite a hard conversation to have. Still, I really wanted them to go and enjoy the holiday, and got a family member, an aunt, was going to come and stay with me for the week while the rest of my family was away. So then I had a CT scan So that's like an X-ray scan. It's basically having loads and loads and loads of X-rays at usually about 3 millimeters apart. So it makes the machine kind of takes these X-ray slices of you, and then they build a 3D model. And that's fine. So again, I knew that it was much quicker to get the result by going back to the local doctor's office. So third doctor this time, I said, the result of the CT scan, the report should be on the system. I know it's either going to be no news if it's sort of an unclear scan, or bad news. And he looked at the screen and sort of said, are you sure you want this information? This very much falls in the category of bad news. He said, well, do you want to call someone or whatever? And I said, no, tell me what the results are. And the results were that the cancer had already spread to a whole bunch of places. And he said, I'm afraid it's terminal. You've got terminal cancer. Terminal now means that at the moment your cancer is not curable, although fortunately cancer treatment is progressing relatively quickly, and it's new treatments are coming on, it's improving. So I go home and talk to my aunt. Now at this time my family are in Greece, and there's no way I'm going to tell them while they're there. So you can imagine, we kind of had a couple of phone calls during that week with my wife. I'm having to kind of say, oh, isn't it, sort of talking about the cancer and what a shock it is. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, actually, it's going to kill me. And even that was nothing to prepare me for what happened next. But at this point, as a hacker, what do you do? Right? It's all very well kind of, playing around with shell code and exploits and cool hardware hacking and social engineering and bumping locks and all this kind of stuff. But what about when this is your life? I mean, your life depends on it. So it was time to get hacking, and especially it was time to start asking a lot of questions and trying to find any kind of exploits. Now, one thing that happened was very good. Two very good friends of mine came to visit, and they took me out for lunch. Eating is kind of an interesting experience when you know that there's a massive tumour in your body that's blocking up your intestines. So you have to eat like what's called a zero residue diet. So like, avoiding kind of fibrous food and stuff. And so my friend Eben Upton and his wife Liz Upton, so you've probably heard of them. Eben is a co-founder of Raspberry Pi. He and Liz came over, took me out for lunch, and Eben said something really, really interesting and massively useful, which is actually one of the reasons why I'm still alive 4 years later. He said that when the first waves of HIV were around in the 1980s, a few people who had access to the experimental treatments would get a good response and would survive, and then some of those people would sort of get through the next stage of experimental treatments. And in fact, there are still some people alive now who were in those original waves of HIV in the UK and the US and other countries, and they were the ones who got access to the new treatments and the ones that got the good responses and went through to the next stages of treatment. And now HIV is something that's can be managed and treated as a chronic disease, it's like a long-term disease, with a very good prognosis, very good life expectancy, and hopefully soon it will be completely preventable and completely curable in all the case of people who have it already. So I started realizing that access to the new treatments was really, really important. Now, what are you going to do? I mean, I've had no medical knowledge. I wasn't particularly familiar with what the different bits of the intestines did or the other places where the cancer was spread to. So it spread to my liver, spread to the lymph nodes. So lymph nodes connect to your lymphatic system, which is where like your white blood cells and stuff move around, and lymph nodes drain the lymph back into the bloodstream where it's sort of broken down. And it also spread to this thing called the peritoneum that I never heard of, which is like your abdominal membrane. So very quickly, I decided it was time to learn a lot about blood tests, and especially cancer blood tests, where you test these things called tumour markers, which hopefully correlate to how the cancer is doing, and particularly how viable is the cancer in terms of being able to spread and grow. So you can measure like proteins in the body that correlate to cancer tumours, and if those levels are rising, then it means the cancer could be able to grow or spread. And you know, I hit the file sharing websites and BitTorrent and found really quite good medical training, and I started getting quite good at reading medical papers, and I looked at the 6 degrees of separation idea, so that you look at the person you need to be in contact with and you work backwards from that and try and find some kind of connection with that person. And I started to learn a lot in quite a short period of time. And I also decided that staying in the UK I was going to die. Now, I had been living off and on in Japan for about 10 years at that time, maybe a bit less, probably maybe 8 or 9 years. And I quickly learned that the standard of cancer care in the UK is poor, and the standard of cancer care in Japan is very, very, very good. So I decided to go back to Japan. There's practical reasons as well, that I knew a lot more people in Tokyo. I live in the west of Tokyo, near Yokohama. And so I actually had more support, and it'd be much better for the kids as well. And Japan is overall a considerably more pleasant country than England to spend, you know, your last days. One thing I discovered, and the reason I said that the terminal cancer diagnosis didn't do anything to prepare me for the worst news that was later on, is I had a PET scan in the UK. So PET scan is a nuclear scan. So you're injected with radioactive sugar, so it's glucose, and I think like one of the atoms in the glucose molecule has been replaced by I think it's a radioactive fluorine atom, and you then after being injected with the sugar, you sort of lie down and have this sugar sort of goes around you for an hour or 90 minutes. Then you're put in the PET scanner. PET scan is positron emission tomography. Tomography just means making a picture out of like slices and layers. And positron emission, I guess the radioactive sugar is emitting the positrons, which are the positive counterpart to electrons, and the scanner kind of picks up these. And PET scans make this kind of image where it shows what bits of the body the radioactive sugar went to quickly, and because cancer is sort of hungry for sugar, it goes to those organs where the cancer is, or goes to tumours in other parts of your body where the cancer is spread to. And also, that kind of scan can show how well an organ is working, because, for example, so you might have it not as part of a cancer diagnosis, but just to see if there's problems with your organs, it can show how well they're functioning, because you know your kidneys should light up on a PET scan, and yeah, you'll see that heart and whatever. So PET scan was the one that showed there was a tumour on the peritoneum, the abdominal membrane. So this is that membrane that protects the organs of the abdomen, and that had been suspected from the CT scan. The CT scan showed this like bumpy kind of texture of that membrane, so that's they call that irregular thickening. And the PET scan confirmed that the cancer spread to there, and that meant instead of having something like a 25% chance to live 4 years, which was the prognosis for colon cancer, and you know, 25% chance of living 4 years when you're 36 years old and in very good health, except for the terminal cancer bit, that means you've got a pretty good chance of making it. 25% doesn't sound a lot, but healthy and young, you can put up with a lot of treatment, and you're likely to be that group getting through to the next round, and getting through to the next round, and getting through to the next round. You're likely to be an outlier, because that 25%, you know, the 75% who don't make it to 5 years, that includes people who were too sick to have any treatment at all, or people who the cancer had already spread to the brain and bones. That's kind of very hard to treat. When it spread to your abdominal membrane, 5-year survival rate was like 0.5%, with no real outliers, so no long-term survivors really, regardless of age. So I then looked into what the life expectancy was for stage 4 colorectal cancer spread to the peritoneum, and realistic life expectancy was going to be 5 to 7 months. So I wanted to be back in Tokyo and do fun stuff with the kids before dying quite an unpleasant and painful death. Not particularly nice. I made some videos about that sort of thing on YouTube. You can hunt around for me. If you go to karamoon.tech, then you'll that forwards to like a crowdfunding page, and if you click updates, you'll see a bunch of videos that I published on details about the treatment I've had and this kind of thing. So I'm desperately studying oncology in 2006, packing up my stuff, heading to Japan for like urgent surgery, and learning about cancer staging. So what it means, like stage 1 cancer, when it depends on the type of cancer, but generally stage 1 cancer means the cancer's in one place, particularly in one organ. It's like you've got cancer in your liver, but it's just in your liver, and it's usually like one tumour in the liver. Stage 2 would be it's spread like within the liver or whatever organ it's in. Stage 3 would be it's spread to local organs, and in my case, stage 4 is spread to distant organs. So, spending my time on BitTorrent and file sharing websites, I am extremely grateful that so many fantastic medical trainings and medical books are shared around on the web, because that's one of the things that's kept me alive. And in the background, there's the very serious issue of not having any money being like a freelance worker, doing a bit of consulting and a bit of English teaching in Japan. When you're sick, there's no work, and cancer treatment's expensive. Now, if I'd stayed in the UK, I'd have got all the treatment for free, very poor quality treatment. I definitely would have died that year, so July 2016. So yeah, maybe would have lasted a year or slightly under that. So would have got free treatment for that sort of 7+ months, or whatever it would have been in the UK before I died. In Japan, if you have public health insurance, you pay 30% of your medical expenses, but it's capped. But still, it's a chunk of money when you're like me with no money. And crowdfunding was, the obvious solution. And again, like I wouldn't be alive except for the hacker community, because my friend Mitch Altman, inventor of TV Be Gone, he promoted my crowdfunding, as did one of the pioneers of podcasting, Bicycle Mark. Bicycle Mark has interviewed me for his various podcasts, I think now probably 5 or 6 times since the cancer diagnosis. And they've promoted my stuff. Emmanuel Goldstein has promoted my crowdfunding as well, and very kindly interviewed me on Off the Hook. And his support through all of this has been incredible. He reads out my letters on Off the Hook and Off the Wall, and it's just been fantastic. As of people like Rob T. Firefly and these people that have been helping out and spreading the word. So with the crowdfunding, I was able to then have treatment that's not covered by insurance. So one thing I realized is that the outliers with terminal cancer, who in very, very, very rare cases get cured, and in other cases at least get to the point where the cancer is treated as a chronic disease, what sets them apart is their access to new treatments, and also the condition of their immune system. So I very quickly found out that one of the reasons why people don't generally survive cancer that's spread is that the treatments are brutal. Absolutely brutal. And in particular, and very ironically, they damage your immune system. Now, cancer is a very sophisticated set of diseases. It hides from your immune system. It suppresses your immune system. But the 3 classic, what are called the 3 pillars of cancer treatments, that's surgery, cutting out the cancer and also cutting out a big margin around it where the cancer is probably spread to, and radiotherapy, so using radiation to fry the cancer. Doesn't actually, you don't really use radiation to fry the cancer. What you use is the radiation creates ions, so it knocks electrons off atoms in your body, and those ions damage the cancer cells, and the cancer cells die or are killed by your body. And chemotherapy, which is a set of toxins, they're toxic drugs that interfere with the cell cycle. So cancer cells are dividing, and that's how it kind of grows and spreads around. And as an adult, most of your cells are not dividing because you're fully grown. And chemotherapy, in theory, is going to target your cancer cells. Unfortunately, you do have some cells that are always growing, which are things like lining of your mouth, skin follicles, hair follicles, all your skin cells, the lining of your intestines and stomach. And of course, anytime you get even a little injury, a bruise, little cut, anytime you get a bruise, then your body needs to grow more capillaries to fix that. So the classic 3 cancer treatments, they are devastating to your immune system. They cause a lot of immune suppression. Chemotherapy is so toxic that you tend to have it in cycles. So you have like a big treatment of chemotherapy, and then you have to have a rest, and then big treatment of chemotherapy again, and you might have 6 cycles or 12 cycles over a 3 or 6 or 12 month period. In my case, I've had chemotherapy basically all the time for the past 4 years. I had a 6-month break after massive liver surgery. But I found that there are other treatments that don't damage your immune system so much or even boost your immune system, immunotherapy being a key one. But also I found that with chemotherapy, you could have low-dose chemotherapy without the big breaks. So the big breaks give your cancer a chance to regroup and regrow and spread. Having a continuous low-dose chemotherapy, still going to damage your body a lot, especially heart and liver. You get this thing called fibrosis, where like the tissue becomes hard and fibrous. So if you can imagine like muscle fibers in your heart, when they're damaged, they get these cross links as they try and repair. So the chemotherapy damages it, and the tissue goes hard, which means if you need surgery later on, like I had liver surgery, when they're cutting through that fibrotic tissue, it bleeds and bleeds and bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. And it makes surgery dangerous and difficult. So I found that, there are treatments that don't harm your immune system so much, and there are ways of using the classical treatments. So if you have keyhole surgery, that's called laparoscopic surgery, I think, where they sort of inflate your body with carbon dioxide, and or if it's abdominal surgery, and then cut little holes in you and stick the camera in and the tools in. I think it's like a super mini version of a GoPro camera or whatever, and stick some lights in there and hack about. That damages your immune system less, and the recovery is much quicker, and you can start the other treatments again much quicker. With chemo, getting the low dose chemotherapy, also when you're having the chemotherapy, heating the organs. So when I have chemotherapy, they stick me in this machine for about 40 minutes and heats up the organs. So in my case, the liver and the lung and abdominal membrane. So the cancer later spread to my right lung. Not fun at all. And when you heat up the organs, the blood flow increases, which means the chemotherapy agent is going to get in there more into where it's needed. And that's really important because with big tumours, there's not good blood supply in the centre of the tumour. And in the case of the abdominal membrane, those tumours are flat and have a very poor blood supply, and you tend to get a lot of very small tumours with poor blood supplies on the abdominal membrane. So you're not going to get the chemo drug in there. So step by step, I started learning. I started teaching myself oncology really, and looking for people in the hacker community who had experiences they could share with me or could help with the crowdfunding. And I used the 6 degrees of separation idea. More than anything else, I used this really cheesy, corny 3-step thing I think I had maybe seen it in a crummy self-help talk or something. But this 3-step way of dealing with a crisis or bad news. So step 1, don't worry alone. That means tell some people, choose those people carefully, but tell some people. Step 2, get the facts. So don't be concerned about things that are unclear yet. Go and look for the real information. So I was I mean, I read the same kind of clinical papers that my doctors read. I read the same textbooks that they read. I do the same video training courses that they go on. So get the real high quality information. And step 3, make the plan. So having a plan, even a bad plan, is a lot better than no plan, because it gives you breathing space, gives you time to get some clarity. So over the past 4 years, I've had bad news and more bad news and more bad news. And I've always taken that 3-step approach. And over the kind of past year, the news starts changing to when the doctors say there's no evidence of disease. Now, in my case, that means a lot less than it would for someone with other types of cancer, because when the cancer spread to the abdominal membrane, it's very difficult to see on the scanners, because the scanners can see things of like 5 millimeters and bigger. When it's on the cancer's on the abdominal membrane, you're going to get a lot of 1 or 2 millimeter tumors spread across it, and they're very flat. The cancer scanners, like CT scans, MRI scans, that's the magnetic resonance imaging one, used to be called NMRI, but people were too scared of the word nuclear, so they're now MRI scans. And then the PET scans, they all see things that are like 5 millimeters and above, and they tend to see things that have some bulk to them. They're not very good at seeing flat structures in the body. So, that's where I'm at now. So, still, there'll be cancer floating around my body. I'm still continuing the low-dose chemotherapy. And amazingly, there's still been interest from the hacker community, which is just incredible. Still getting interviewed on the podcasts, and people are still writing about my situation on social media, and that has kind of been one of the things that has kept me alive, because first of all, it just gives you a lot of strength to go on, and you need a lot of strength when you're getting bad news and then more bad news and more bad news, but also keeping the crowdfunding going. Cancer is a marathon, not a sprint. And I've also, thinking about the wider picture, not thinking about my situation, it's very, very, very clear that as hackers, as a hacker community, we have to get involved in medicine. We have to give support to the doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers. The support we can give them is our expertise about using technology, our expertise about building community, our expertise about sharing knowledge. So much of medicine is just embarrassingly broken. So the concept of a paper, a clinical paper, medical paper, it's nonsense. The focus on writing this static document that gets peer reviewed, and it's a completely binary thing. Yes, no, it's published or it's not. And what we need is something far more Wikipedia style, with annotations and references and attached training and comments from experts all over the world, and all that stuff has to be online for free in an easy to use and most importantly easy to reuse format. Often medical stuff is behind paywalls. It's often in PDF format. It's not particularly accessible. It's not well indexed. There's no public commenting system or even kind of private commenting system. We need to get involved in medicine. One thing we desperately need to do is we need to look at medical equipment and how we can refactor it. So we need to get involved in hardware refactoring. So we need to look at how we can build medical equipment that is operationally identical. So it doesn't, it's not going to have the same kind of development and testing as like a new invention. Like it doesn't need to be improved, but what it needs to be operationally identical, same user interface, working exactly the same way, but a fraction of the cost, smaller size, lower power consumption. We know what to do, so let's get involved. Well, thank you ever so much for surviving 40 minutes of a miserable and dark topic. I hope it's been of use to you. If you know of anyone with cancer or you have cancer yourself, go to cancertips.xyz, and that's a list of cancer tips I wrote. The sort of things I wished I had known when I got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And also karamoon.tech, that forwards to my crowdfunding page, and you can see video updates and how I'm doing and a lot of details about the treatments I've had. Thanks a lot for listening. Thanks for being there for me. Deeply appreciate, especially Emmanuel and all the Hope team for putting together this incredible game-changing conference. Hope absolutely changed the hacker world when US hackers were going off to looking at what hippies from hell were doing, the Dutch hackers putting on the hack conferences, and of course CCC, Chaos Communication Club, Chaos Computer Club with their events, Chaos Computer Camp and Chaos Communication Congress. Hope has really raised the bar all around the world for what hacking is and can be. Let's get involved in the medical stuff. Please get in contact with me, Karamoon on Twitter. That's Karamoon, named after the fabled land in Shadow of the Beast 2, the greatest game ever made. And thanks for listening. Get in touch, and I'll be taking questions. Cheers.
The information sharing is, of course, exactly the hacker ethic that we are following here. I'd like to thank you for sharing. Thank you for being open. And we have some questions that have come in from the live audience. I think the first thing to start with is you've learned so much. This is a learning journey, obviously, as well as the journey of so many other types. But what do you think is the main thing that you've done differently from other patients faced with this situation?
So I've always tried to be aware of my own biases. The real danger you have is survivor bias, which means just, you hear stuff that worked for some people and then you naturally feel you want to pursue that. What you don't hear is all the people that tried that same treatment or that same method and sadly didn't make it. So throughout the whole of this 4-year nightmare, I've been always trying to think, am I being biased? Another key bias is confirmation bias. So you hear of some treatment and you go out and look for it online, see what people are saying about it, and you are looking for a positive result and you're blinded to the negatives. Another problem is the availability bias, which means that we tend to believe what we remember. So if something is simple and easy to understand, we tend to believe it, but that has no correlation with it being true in the context of something as complex and complicated as cancer. Being aware of my biases is a really big one. And just like a hacker, just asking as many questions as you can and asking the powerful questions. Always when you're talking to the doctors or the nurses, you say, what else should I ask you? What would you do in my situation? If the clinical guidelines didn't exist that you're following, what would your advice be? So you're always looking, I don't want to say looking for the weak points, but you're looking for the edge cases. You want to be an outlier. When you've got terminal cancer, you want to be an outlier. You want to live for a very long time.
During the HOPE conference, we've had several talks already that focus on essentially misinformation, disinformation, and it sounds like you're in the same situation. Even though there probably aren't as many bad actors. It's not like someone trying to throw the U.S. election in 2016 or something like that. But so maybe not quite as many bad intentions or state-sponsored, et cetera. But there's an awful lot of misinformation and disinformation concerning health. What happened when you came across, like, let's say, an alternative? Someone says, "Oh, you should, have oxygen, or you should try, microdoses of, some poison or something like that." I mean, did you discard it out of hand, or did you discover that you really wanted to look into every possibility?
So, first of all, there are plenty of bad actors. There are, people looking for money. So that's, one thing is always follow the money. Look at the trail. Who would profit by this? There are plenty of just misguided, well-intentioned people who are suffering strongly from those biases I mentioned. So I always, try and judge the thing on its own merits, but also, what Carl Sagan said about if some claim is very extreme, then it needs extreme evidence to back it up. So if someone, someone says they cured themselves by using cannabis oil or dog deworming tablets or whatever, one tablet or one course of tablets, and they were cancer-free for the rest of their life, then, you need very, very big evidence to back that up. I mean, that's why we have double-blind trials. Double-blind trial means the patient doesn't know if they're getting the real treatment or the placebo, but nor do the doctors and nurses giving that treatment. That's what double-blind means, and that's so important because everyone is biased and everyone's hoping for a good result. But yeah, there are plenty of bad actors, and I'd say some might say the pharmaceutical companies are included in that. It's a profit-driven industry, right?
Yeah, so people watching this talk might be interested in watching some of those other HOPE talks where people took a deep dive into some of that information validation, fact checking, all that. And of course, for you, the stakes couldn't be higher. You gave sort of a call to action there. You said you really would like to see more hackers involved with medical care. Could you get a little more specific about that? What can hackers do to improve cancer care and medical care in general?
So I think the key thing is get engaged in the medical care and talk to the people on their terms. So instead of saying things like, let's hack together some new scanning technology, instead talking to just your family doctor or just people you come across in the medical settings, and point out things like MRI scanners should not be connected to the internet. You should not be running Windows XP on hospital computers, thinking Service Pack 4 is going to protect you. And yeah, just making the hacker community as welcoming as possible. Invite your doctor to the local 2600 meeting. Leave copies of 2600 around the hospital waiting rooms. There's a lot we can do in engaging with clinical staff on their terms. It's always less effective to have the attitude of like, we're right, we've got all the answers, we're going to make something and give it to the doctors or any other context. Same is true of education as well. Yeah.
So engagement is really the key that you're advocating for.
Engaging on their terms.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So just very quickly, because we're really at the end of our time, do you feel like you're now an expert? There's no doubt about that, even though you're not necessarily an oncologist or something like that, but you're obviously an expert. Do you think there will ever be a silver bullet style cure for cancer?
I do. That the pharmaceutical industry is desperate to not have curative treatments, but to have treatments treating cancer as a lifelong chronic disease. And they want a series of treatments, so genetic testing, and then they'll recommend a drug, And then when that stops working for the patient, when the drug resistance builds up, then genetic testing again, seeing any new mutations, different drug. That's not the way we should go for patients. We need to look at what are called cancer agnostic treatments. So things like those treatments that boost the immune system. There's a whole family of immunotherapies of which I've had some, and they work regardless of where the cancer started. So instead of having a treatment for breast cancer, treatment for bowel cancer, treatment for lung cancer, look at those, put all the resources into those few treatments that seem to have a very wide use, those cancer agnostic treatments, and always look at the treatments that improve the patient's immune system, or at least don't destroy the patient's immune system, because things like chemotherapy and surgery and radiation, all of which I've had, they trash your immune system, which is not what you want when you have cancer cells inside you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. We've been in conversation with Karamoon, who had a personal odyssey with death and is still with us and has made that hero's journey and returned to tell the tale. I appreciate you sharing with the Hackers on Planet Earth audience, and thank you. And I think this is a time when we really all mean be well.
Thank you so much. Cheers, Greg.